All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to my channel. My name is Douglas A. Burton. I'm an author, and joining me today is Heath Robinson from Table Talk and Heath's Geekverse, and Retro Nerd Girl from the Retro Nerd Girl channel.
Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Today we're going to talk about the official history of the Kennedy era of Star Wars. We know it's coming to an end. Most likely there'll be an announcement in the next month or so about her departure and the plans to replace her. And probably by the end of the year, she'll be out of Lucasfilm in a large way, if not completely. And so for the first time, we really have bookends. We know when this began, we know when it ended, and it's worth studying. It's worth looking at this because I believe that what happened with Lucasfilm was rather unprecedented. The optimism, the highs and the lows, and just the story behind this franchise and behind this company over the last 13 years is pretty incredible. And at some point, they're going to have to do a college course on this. But in the meantime, we all lived through it. Right? We lived through this. So we know what this was like.
We survived. We survived it.
We did. We barely survived it. So I was going to show you too, just from a financial point of view, right off the bat, I wanted to discuss this and take a look at what this is. I went through and I took a look at all of Disney's Star Wars projects from the beginning to the end. So quick disclaimer, this is the best available information. Some of it is cited information. We know the exact amount that's been reported. And I think over the last year, we've also found out that some of these projects were more expensive than we initially thought. So these are the most recent figures as far as I could tell. So I wanted to go through it. You know, this is all the things that they paid money for. They started it with $4 billion. Disney spent a ton of money. They spent just over $4 billion just to acquire Lucasfilm. We all know that. And then they quickly produced a couple seasons of Rebels, The Force Awakens, which, by the way, $533 million to produce a single movie is insanity. That's insanity. Now, it is Star Wars.
I didn't realize it was that much.
Yeah,
that's the revised figure. So I mean that's a lot of money. I get that this is Star Wars, and if you're gonna spend a lot of money on a movie, there's definitely a case to be made that this is the one you do it for. But still, $533 million for a single movie is a lot of money. Rogue One, another 280. You had The Last Jedi at 300 million, Solo at 275. Lots of reshoots there. The Galaxy's Edge part, the theme park over at Disney, that was $1 billion to put that out there. The Rise of Skywalker, $416 billion. And then you get the streaming wars where they begin to spend astronomical amounts of money on shows that they would not sell tickets for. Mando, 120 million. Mando season 2, 120 million. Some smaller numbers there. The Galactic Star Cruiser, $1 billion investment there for that LARPing experience hotel. $90 million on Obi-Wan, one that probably should have had a higher budget. Andor season 1, $250 million to produce a TV show like that. The Willow series, $172 million. Bad Batch, Mando season 3. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, $387 million.
That one spiraled out of control.
I mean, this is like someone got a hold of their dad's credit card and just went nuts with it. The Acolyte, $230 million, $250 million on Star Wars Outlaws, the video game that no one bought. Skeleton Crew, $136 million. Andor season 2 that's coming out, $290 million. And then you've got the new movie coming out, and you got a grand total, if you add up all of the most reliable figures out there, $10.744 billion spent on Star Wars projects.
Yeah.
Yeah, not including anything like toys or anything like that. That's the development there. Yeah. This is just, you're talking about the shows. And when you put it like that, Doug, when you look at 10.7 billion, you're like, what did we get? What do we have for Star Wars now? That's really
like,
sobering.
maybe
It
like
is.
a handful of shows and maybe one movie that maybe you liked, which is not good.
Well, and
Right.
especially when you're thinking about what are you going to go back and watch? You know, I watched
Hmm.
the original trilogy over and over and over and over again as a kid. You know, we had tapes that were just taped off of television.
Yeah.
Then later we got the movies. So, like, you know, like an official copy or something like that, and watched those over and over. So, you know, that was back in the time when you watched something over and over and over again. And when I was looking
Yeah.
at this list that you're showing, a lot of some of them I have not seen at all. Like, I still have not seen Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny, for example. And, you know,
Mhm.
and so, I mean, there's still things I have not seen, but the number of things that I've seen twice on this list is incredibly small. And the ones that I've seen twice is because I was going to deliberately watch them because I was like, was it as bad as I remembered? And so I did a deliberate like one weekend while I was like working on painting miniatures. I was like, let me just put it all on to, you know, go through all the movies. And it was, as it turns out. But, you know, that's why I would have watched them a second time. I don't think these things I've ever sat down and gone, man, that was so amazing. I think I'll watch it again.
Well,
Yeah.
and we'll get into it when we get to that point in the history of this era. But these were movies that obviously a lot of people rewatched, right, when they first came out. But going back, these are unwatchable films at this point because it's an incoherent story. So
Yeah.
everything you thought you loved about The Force Awakens in 2015, now when you watch it, you're like, oh, Snoke, who cares about this guy? So none of it really matters. So these movies are virtually unwatchable. I would love to know how much viewing time these get on Disney Plus, if any, in 2025.
How will we ever know?
Well, they would have to tell us, which they won't, but I would love to know.
Yeah.
There is a little following for the Rebels show, Rebel seasons 1 through 4. There is a following for that. I didn't quite get into it, but the shows aren't bad.
My friend Lou was a big fan of those, and I did watch some of those on his recommendation, and I don't remember how far I got, but yes, that show does have a following.
Yeah. Rogue One, I actually like Rogue One, but a weird little secret, I only watch parts of it. I almost never watch it from beginning to end. Last Jedi, Solo, I heard Solo's fairly decent, but I don't even have the desire to go back and watch it. Never seen these. Rise of Skywalker is unwatchable. Mando is pretty cool, but to be honest, I have not really gone back to rewatch a lot of the Mando stuff. However, it's conceivable to go back and watch Mando, I guess. I love Clone Wars. I am a huge Clone Wars fan. So that there is a built-in fan base for the Clone Wars animated series. There is a built-in fan base for the Bad Batch. Visions, I'm not big on, but there is a small but loyal following there. Retro, I think you're kind of big on Visions, right?
Yeah, so I thought that they were very creative. They involved a lot of new ideas for Star Wars, but it is niche, and they did well to only spend $15 million on it.
Yeah,
you
minimal
keep the
investment.
budgets. Yeah, you keep the budgets low for those kinds of experimental things, and it was very enjoyable. And I think like low risk project that was fun to watch for me.
I will say there were some episodes that I thought were wildly off brand, and we could get to it more later. But I do remember there was a Japanese anime samurai episode that I really liked. I really liked it. Book of Boba Fett. I don't think this is rewatchable. Some people like Obi-Wan Kenobi. There is a small following.
Yeah, I do, but I recognize the problems absolutely. But there's something about the character of Obi-Wan that I just want more.
Yeah, well, it's Ewan McGregor.
I was not an Obi-Wan fan.
Yeah, I'm not an Obi-Wan fan at all. Not the show.
Character, the TV show.
TV show,
the show I'm talking about. Yeah, the Obi-Wan.
Right,
yeah.
right. Same here. I love the character, hate the show.
Yeah.
Andor is actually excellent. There's some really good stuff in Andor, and I think they're about to score
really
another touchdown with season 2. Tales of the Jedi is actually pretty good. Willow was not only does this not have rewatchability, it's like officially unwatchable again because Disney made it disappear.
Yes, it's gone.
Yeah. Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny doesn't have many fans. Ahsoka, I just like really the one episode, maybe two, but there's things about Ahsoka I still maintain that I like, but there's also a lot that I really am turned off by. I
It
love
had
Bad
many,
Batch, Tales of the
yeah.
Empire. What were you going to say, Retro?
I was gonna say it had mixed reviews.
Mixed reviews. Perfect.
Yeah.
The Acolyte is awful. I mean, certifiably, possibly the franchise killer. Out of all the damage done, this was kind of like they needed a win, and instead they got the big loss instead. So this did a lot of damage. And believe it or not, Star Wars Outlaws is excellent. Or I'm sorry, not Outlaws is bad. No one bought that video game. Skeleton Crew is really good, but no one watched it. So
Yeah.
I think Andor
That's to me
season
that has
2
the same problem. That seems to be like Andor on steroids, because I still haven't seen Andor, even though everybody tells me it's great, including both of you. It's still on my watch list. So if Skeleton Crew is great, if Andor had the problem that it was good and nobody watched it, or good or great and nobody watched it because it came off of Kenobi, which is my issue. I turned everything off after Kenobi, never saw Andor because we've got this up and down. If Skeleton Crew is good, it's Andor on steroids, that everybody was tuned out by that time. And even if it's fantastic, which I hear it's good from different people, it has not had an impact.
Right. So what is the cultural relevancy of all of this body of work? I dare say most of it is going to be rather inconsequential, unfortunately. Most of this stuff, at the very least, $10.7 billion plus. I say this was not worth it. And I did a little bit more homework here. I did look at what the films made back. Because, when you make Andor, you don't make any money back. You don't sell tickets for Andor. You just give, and you don't even sell it to Netflix, right? You spend the money to make Andor, and you hand it to your department down the hall to put onto Disney Plus.
Yeah.
So,
but do we know how that works internally? I mean, because I don't, because you could be running Lucas or Disney internally as separate businesses, on paper. So, okay, if I'm running Disney Plus, I might say, okay, we're going to, we got Marvel who's sending us material. We got Lucasfilm who's sending us material. And, for every watch minute or something, you get some fractional and then get money back. I mean,
well,
do we even know how that works?
I don't think we know how it
would
works.
operate it.
But I would say this, regardless of how it works, if Disney pays Lucasfilm a dime, then that's still in the red for Disney. They're still spending money on a product that they're buying from themselves, basically. So it's still net. So Lucasfilm might make $1, but Disney loses $1, which in the world of Disney, they just moved $1 from, room 5 to room 6.
Yes. I mean, yeah. But I mean, if, the way I would be running it is if I'm running Disney Plus, then I've got the revenue from my subscriptions, and I'm going to be sending back a fraction of a cent per watch minute to the studio that produces the material, but I still have to personally be net positive.
Right. You still have to pay.
Am I over here positive? And so that's why I was talking about running individual companies within Disney. I don't know how that works. I'm just saying something like that's probably how I would set it up if I were setting up some type of thing, but we don't know. We don't know.
We don't know. And the strikes were supposedly trying to address that with streamers, and something was agreed, but it's so small right now. Like they really haven't figured it all out, and that's something that they're working on, because you've got millions of views, and then they're like, oh, this particular show has a certain million of views, and so that's the benefit back. But it all goes under the same subscription. They have to have new content for subscriptions every month or so. So that's why we keep getting all of these things. But are they really good? Is the question? Why are they wasting their this incredible brand on this on shows that are subpar?
Well, and there is a lot of gray area here, right? So Disney Plus could have launched without Star Wars. You still have the Disney brand itself, all those Disney movies. You still have Pixar. You still have Marvel. So technically, it's hard to. What I'm saying is, it's hard to credit Star Wars directly unless you could see the viewership minutes. And I'm sure Star Wars got some good viewership minutes on premieres, but overall the viewership dropped and continued to decline from Mandalorian down to, by the time we got to Skeleton Crew or even Ahsoka, the viewership numbers were down.
Sure.
So just on a straight basis, in terms of profits. So when you see that Force Awakens made $2 billion at the box office, half of that money goes to the movie theaters. So when it says it grossed $2 billion, well, only $1 billion goes back to Disney or Lucasfilm, I guess, Disney Lucasfilm. So that's why these numbers are like that. I had to remove the amount that the theaters take from the box office till, which is about half. So the actual profits for The Force Awakens, which is still impressive. That's why I put it in gold. It's $1 billion. That's so rare. Rogue One.
Well, also, Doug, just asking you how you're calculating this, because there's the production costs as well, but there's also all the advertising costs. So
I did not include the advertising costs.
You did not include, and that's a big one. I mean, you can spend the same amount making the show as you do advertising the film.
Right.
Mhm.
So this does not include advertising. That's huge.
So it is. It actually, a lot of times they say it almost equals the budget of the film itself. So the reason I didn't include it is because I wanted a straight up comparison, because there's always going to be variables, right? Like the toy sales and merchandising sales. But then there's the costs to produce the toys and the merchandising sales. And that's Hasbro. That's a different company. So, it gets really sticky for sure. And there is profits that Disney made off Star Wars, particularly in the early goings. Like Force Awakens was a merchandising juggernaut. No question about it. But by the time you got to Rise of Skywalker, nobody bought anything. It was a merchandising black hole. But the only merchandising I decided to add, because I wanted to give full credit, was The Mandalorian. I put it as I looked it up, and they estimate about $1 billion worth of merchandising sales from The Mandalorian from a show. So that's worth noting. Mandalorian was a pretty good merchandising thing, but worth noting, Solo lost money. They lost money on some of these movies. And by the time you get to the Galactic Star Cruiser and Indiana Jones 5, you are losing money. You're actually making products that don't make their money back with what are considered can't miss IPs. So at the end of the day, with a straight up comparison, they made about 3.3 roughly billion dollars back from their $10 billion, almost $11 billion investment. So from a straight up comparison, they have to find somewhere from, like what you said, toy sales, whatever else, they got to find 7.5 billion somewhere else.
Well, and
to break even.
If you're not calculating advertising costs, they got to find more than that.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. So a lot was spent.
This is the most generous kind of analysis you can do, and it looks bad.
Yeah, exactly. This is a generous, straight up shot analysis, just to look at show productions and the big investments that they made and what those things directly made back. Because even like the Galaxy's Edge, which is a theme park, how many people are coming out to Disney today anyway? And if they don't spend, let's say Galaxy's Edge wasn't there, and I take my family to Disney World, I'm still going to spend money. It just won't be at Galaxy's Edge. So it's hard to credit, how much profit they can give to that. And a lot of reports came out that for a good long time, Galaxy's Edge was just not getting a lot of traction. So, and the Galactic Star Cruiser, the thing didn't even last a year. $1 billion investment there. So, pretty incredible numbers when you stop and look at them. So here we are, all these years later. This is the list. That's the story. They produced all of this stuff, and that's what it was. So what happened, right? What happened with Lucasfilm for this to occur? So we're going to take a look at the history here, and we're going to go back and we're going to take a look, and we're going to provide some commentary, some analysis, some critique, and some opinions about what this means. And in a sense, we're going to recontextualize all of it, because we know now how this story ends, unfortunately. So we're going to start with part one. which is, so part one is the Heir to the Empire. So
Ooh.
Lucasfilm made it
Okay.
all this
I
time.
like
You know,
it.
they
I
pretty
love
much
that.
revitalized the entire industry back in 1976, 1977. You know, Lucasfilm, Industrial Light and Magic, Skywalker Sound, all of these things were created. And Lucasfilm like reformed Hollywood in its own image and created one of the most memorable trilogies in history and became one of the most valuable IPs in history. And it went on to make the sequel trilogies, the special editions, all sorts of stuff, a merchandising empire. And in 2012, George Lucas decided it's time for him to move on. So,
Yes.
who is the heir to this empire? The Walt Disney World, which we have to put ourselves back in the mindset of 2012. Disney seemed a match made in heaven, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
mean, did anybody have serious concerns about Disney taking over Lucasfilm in 2012?
No, at the time, I remember this being a major heyday for Disney storytelling. That, 'cause
Yes.
especially coming off of the prequels, which a lot of people like and a lot of people look favorably upon in retrospect. I am not one of those people, but having been critical of the prequels, thinking that okay, now we're going to get Disney level storytelling, we're very
Yes.
excited about this.
Yes, I think everybody had a lot of confidence that Star Wars under in Disney's hands was going to be the absolute pinnacle of storytelling for Star Wars because of their track record before. I mean, they had had some issues around the 60s and 70s, but by the late 80s, they had dialed in storytelling. They knew how to get an audience feeling emotions by watching, basically cartoons. Like how do you do that? They did it. They were also they had Pirates of the Caribbean too. That was just this incredible force of nature of storytelling. And then like, how do you get a pirate story and tell it in a PG way, make it for the whole family, and actually make it amazing? They did that in several stories, in several movies. And so they knew how to do that. We had the confidence that they were going to handle Star Wars properly, and that was what we were hoping. And we're definitely hoping like they were going to find out and suss out all of the areas for drama in the story of Star Wars and give it to us. That was our prayer and our hope. And I think we were really, really happy about this at the time. Everybody was celebrating. It was a great moment, and we were looking forward to what they were going to offer.
Well, and I think that was great point. Disney went into a stale mode there in the 70s and 80s, but then they kind of completely revitalized themselves with The Little Mermaid in 1989, followed
Yes.
up with Beauty and the Beast, then Aladdin, then The Lion King, and suddenly Disney was back in a real big way. And
Yes.
before they even got that phase ended, they started cranking out Toy Story. The new modern
Right.
animated films started coming out, and there's Disney and Pixar right on the forefront of this new revolution in film. And like you said, Pirates of the Caribbean. I mean, the entire era of the early and late 90s to the late 2000s, it was can't miss Disney. They just
Yes.
couldn't miss.
Yes.
So, like Heath said, Lucasfilm, which went out on kind of a sour note with the prequels, is now handing over their property to this can't miss company under Bob Iger.
I wanted to look up, Doug, specifically the acquisition of Pixar. That's what I was doing. Because I was like, wait a minute, because there's Pixar too. Because I love a lot of, especially early Pixar storytelling. Disney acquires Pixar. It's saying that's January 2006, completed May 2006. We completed in May of that same year. So, that's not long off that. So you've had all the Pixar success, a lot of Pixar movies that we love. Disney picks up Pixar in 2006. I'm not sure like what kind of filmography they have put. In fact, maybe I should be able to find that right over here. You know what they put out after that. So 2006, Cars.
Oh my God, Cars.
Release timeline.
Yes,
So you know,
huge.
Cars comes out. My nieces and nephews. I mean, Cars is huge. Ratatouille, Wall-E, 2008.
Love
You know,
Wall-E.
Up,
Lion
2009. They come back with Toy Story 3 in 2010. You know, Toy Story, its storytelling has been like, you know, just bang on. I mean, Toy Story 3, bang, 2010. You've got Cars, Brave, 2012. So I mean, those are the kinds of things that Pixar has been doing that's now part of Disney. And that's part of the context as to why, okay, Disney storytelling is really good at this time.
That's
Yes,
right.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, Toy Story, the first 3 films in particular are as good as it can get for that kind of a genre of filmmaking. I cried in part 3 when the toys thought they weren't going to make it. And they're
Who
going toward the
didn't?
garbage chute. I still get emotional when I watch. I'm always like, oh man, this is the part where these little heroes that we've been following, they don't think they're going to make it, you know. So you know, you're right. I mean, all these things, Disney had a reputation at that point for being the standard of excellence in family-friendly storytelling on the big screen. And guess what? They're going to be the ones that are going to run Star Wars. And you know, Star Wars was in the Disney parks, the Star Tours theme park, you know, so there was always a little incestuous relationship between Lucasfilm and Disney. So it seemed like the most likely scenario. This seemed like a good fit. It's the one that no one really protested.
It was a dream come true for a lot of people. They were like, we love Disney, we love Star Wars, put them together and you're going to have magic all over the place.
That's right.
So, I mean, that was the excitement about that. And it really had people like at the edge of their seat, just waiting for the first couple of projects that that Disney was going to make. And that's the kind of excitement that you want, you know, for your movies. And you know, we were looking forward to now a second renaissance of content from Disney to do with Star Wars, you know, specifically.
Well, and so that, as far as the next step for Star Wars, Lucasfilm going to Disney, that's a W. That was considered a win. Who's going to take over Lucasfilm was the next question. If George Lucas is stepping away, who is going to replace him? And we have coming up Kathleen Kennedy. She and who protested this when this news broke?
Nobody.
In fact, I think it was a widely celebrated decision. She was widely viewed. She's been there since the beginning. You know, I mean, there are all sorts of photographs. That's George and Kathy. It looks like on the set of Indiana Jones.
Yes.
You know, she was there for E.T. You know, she executive produced that. You know, she worked on some of these huge films. All these years from the set. She actually worked on Jaws for a while. I think she was a regular producer on Jaws. So she was there since the 70s, since the 80s. She worked on some of the other big films like Schindler's List. That's her with Liam Neeson. And she, you know, was with Lucasfilm and Spielberg, you know, the big filmmakers of the time through the 90s. That's her on the set with Spielberg for Jurassic Park. So, you know, she was there in the trenches all those years. So when they said that Kathleen Kennedy is going to be taking over for George Lucas, I think the attitude was, this is good stuff. Yeah. This is good. And now when people see this photo or these images, they know what was said during this conversation.
Yes.
like as my kids say, she's caught in 4K.
Yes.
She says, like, we are going to be good stewards of your IP. We're going to take your ideas and we're going to do your vision and we're going to see it through. She tells him right to his face at this table. And at the time, it felt right.
It was amazing. I mean, there was nothing but really intensely goodwill towards Kathleen at this point. How people were so excited. She was, I mean, she was an insider. And so
Yes.
that was the thing that people were really concerned. Will she understand Star Wars? Just because she's been working with Spielberg all of these years, and she was close with, in the vicinity of Lucas. I don't know, she didn't work on any of the Star Wars movies, but she was in that area. So if there was anyone who understood production and could get the job done, it would say, like, yeah, this feels like a great fit. There would be no one else other than like Spielberg himself that you would probably be like, yeah, absolutely, or it just seemed like the right thing, and it was really great to see somebody who had worked on almost all of the films that you loved when you were growing up, now moving on to like the master franchise and coming up in the industry. I was so excited for this.
Oh yeah, 100%. I was, and she was a familiar name. You saw her name on the back or on all those credits. Executive producer Kathleen Kennedy. Her name was familiar. She was familiar. Possibly the best choice, really, at the time when it was told to me. I remember being like, yeah, that man, Kathleen Kennedy. She's going to do a great job. She was there for all of it, so Disney taking over Lucasfilm, that's a win. Kathleen Kennedy assuming control over Lucasfilm, that's a win. It's all good news in 2012 at this time. So, this seems like this all seems like a match made in heaven. We're going good places with all of this. So, what did Lucasfilm get? What was the state of Lucasfilm in 2012? This is important because some of what happened in 2012 was very quiet. Star Wars was relatively quiet to the general public in 2012. They were really doing one major thing, and that was the Clone Wars animated series, which started in 2008, same year that Iron Man came out, actually. So you had this Clone Wars animated series, but not a lot of people knew about it. And lest we forget, this was released as a movie that did terrible. Movie.
I remember that just because I was driving by a movie theater or something and I saw something like Star Wars Clone Wars, and I was like, what is that? I didn't even know that existed. Like, how is it possible that there's a Star Wars movie in theaters that I don't know anything about? And then I saw this kind of like goofy looking animation right here. I looked it up later. I was like, what is that? So it wasn't even something that was on my radar. I just happened to know that it existed because I drove by the movie theater when it was on its, outside sign. And I looked it up and was like, what is that? And so it was not even something that I noticed. Yeah.
Well, and it was on the CW, it was some Disney animated show called The Clone. I never heard of it. It was on the CW. I never heard of it. I never watched it. I forgot actually how this came to my attention, but I found the Clone Wars, I think once it was released to Netflix. I think it started to be carried on Netflix. And I started watching it and I fell in love with the Clone Wars in 2011, before Disney bought Lucasfilm. I started telling everyone and their mothers about the Clone Wars. I was like, you guys have to see this show. It does things that the prequels failed to do. For example, we see, so that's Obi-Wan Kenobi, Jedi Master Kenobi with Admiral Yularen. Suddenly I'm watching these Jedi standing on what looks like the bridge of a Star Destroyer, executing the Clone Wars. So you got Obi-Wan sitting there, overseeing a war. And I was like, oh man, these guys look so Imperial in the Clone Wars. And I never got that impression from the prequels exactly. They skipped over all of this stuff. And the Clone Wars, because it's, it's 22-minute episodes and they kept going and they kept going, you get a chance to really world build the Clone Wars. And they delivered some excellent Star Wars, some great action scenes. They had some so you had the Separatists going up against the Galactic Republic. And they were using the exact stuff. So you had this, you get these column of Y-wings coming in, and you follow them down as they cut through these giant Republic cruisers, and they enter these massive, large-scale set-piece battles. So unlike the Phantom Menace, where there's no fighting really, it's a trade federation, and it's not even like the OG. Yeah, right.
One of my favorite criticisms of that movie, when you're talking about that, because I remember early criticisms of the movie, like through blogs, but the blogging that was going on that I was reading, it starts off like there is a trade dispute between this place and this place, and the bloggers going, trade dispute. What's going on? Is Andrew Jackson in this movie? How am I supposed to get my kids excited about? Okay, we have a trade dispute going on.
Yeah, I knew something was wrong when I first read the opening scroll. I was like, I don't know if I'm into this yet.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is the Phantom Menace really started the drama too early, before there was really much fighting. Hence, the Phantom Menace. It's background danger. Much harder to deliver real drama there. In Star Wars, the original trilogy, you had conflict. But when you start to think about it, it was a small insurgent group fighting this intergalactic, or this galactic empire. In the Clone Wars animated series, you don't have a small upset. You have power on power. It's like World War II. You have the Separatists and the Galactic Republic, two equally matched forces, just clashing it out on these episodes in show after show. And it got to be very exciting because I got to see what the Clone Wars really looked like. And it was intense. I got to see these, like the Venator and these ships going into battle and being crushed by Separatist forces. And then you would see the Republic respond. And like that other image where we saw Obi-Wan on the bridge of a Star Destroyer, they're the good guys in this. We also saw the Jedis behaving much more like the Empire. So here's this is called Darkness on Umbara, one of my favorite episodes, and it's a massive invasion of a planetary invasion of this planet. And this is the first time that the Galactic Republic, the good guys, are fighting humanoids. Not like an alien race, but they look human, and they come storming in. It's a full-scale invasion of this planet, and you get imagery of you have Jedis leading the assault, followed by a host of stormtroopers rushing in. And when I started to watch this, I started to realize that while the Jedi are doing this in the Clone Wars, in episode after episode, they're in essence behaving the way I saw Darth Vader behave. So when I recontextualized some of Star Wars, I was like, so when you think of the Battle of Hoth, with Vader showing up, it's no different. He's just the only Jedi still doing this stuff, right? So here's Anakin. And by the way, in the Clone Wars animated series, Anakin is portrayed as extremely heroic. Extremely heroic. He's a wise and compassionate mentor to Ahsoka Tano. He's brave. So I got really into the Clone Wars animated series, and their animation improves every season. So by 2012, I had just gotten into the show, and I was like really into Clone Wars. Disney bought it and canceled it. So I was a little upset because it ended on one of its highest notes. And just so you know, Retro, this is important too, because in the Clone Wars animated series, Darth Maul is brought back. In season 2, they dedicate some scenes to where he survived his fall from Kenobi, and they really spend some time with his return to the Star Wars universe. So he comes in to this series. And by the way, that woman he's force choking in the background, that her name is the Duchess Sabine. That is Bo-Katan's older sister. And Bo-Katan, as you know, is in Mandalorian season 3. in season 2, but that's her older
Oh.
sister.
I didn't
Um,
recognize her without her headdress.
Right. And you might appreciate this, Retro. There's a romantic storyline between Obi-Wan Kenobi
Yeah,
and the Duchess Satine. And Darth Maul kills her. And this is the scene that so there's a lot going on in the Clone Wars. So when Disney took it over, they inherited some of this new canon, such as Darth Maul's still alive. There's this greater lore of Anakin. And so also, this is one of the most important things. The man behind the Star Wars Clone Wars is a young man at the time named Dave Filoni. He's the man working on Star Wars, the Clone Wars. And I really liked Dave Filoni during this period because he was creating some of the best Star Wars I had seen. And in some ways, he was besting the prequels, in my opinion, with some of the storylines in the Clone Wars series. He was working directly under George Lucas, and this was the Clone Wars is the last project George Lucas ever worked on in the Star Wars universe. So these two collaborated closely. So this is where Dave Filoni came from, right at the beginning. When did you guys first hear of Dave Filoni?
I mean, personally, late. I mean, I was not following this show, so it was well after this. Now he's been there forever since, going back to George Lucas with this. But I mean, at the time, I was not following.
Okay, yeah, because I don't think many normies knew about the Clone Wars. I was like the one fanatic telling everybody, but no one else seemed to know about it.
Well, I knew a lot of people like the Clone Wars. I wasn't a big fan of seeing the animation style in the beginning. And so I kind of tuned out. And then after being pulled back into Star Wars, after I would say Obi-Wan, I was the Obi-Wan show. I was like, okay, let me look at some of the older stuff. So I did check out the Clone Wars and Rebels. Those were the two that I did check out.
Okay. Yeah, and if anyone ever wants, I have a list of which ones to watch and which ones to skip, because there's some, it was on the Cartoon Network. Some of the episodes I would never watch. They're like for little kids and not very exciting. But the Clone Wars is very well received. 93% from the critics, 91% from the Star Wars fan base. That's a hard marks to earn from the Star Wars fan base. So
Indeed.
But it's important to know because this is where Dave Filoni came from, right at the beginning, right at the onset. There's a lot of talk that he's going to be the one taking over Star Wars or Lucasfilm. Should Kathleen Kennedy go? He's in that discussion. Also worth noting, in 2012, Disney inherited the sequel trilogy that was already written.
Correct.
So in the 90s,
yes.
Timothy Zahn wrote the sequel trilogy. These are the 3 stories. I read all 3 books like immediately. The second they hit the shelves, I bought it and I read it. Retro, did you read these?
No.
And I have not either, but they were always around when I was growing up. And I remember my aunt, who was a fanatical Star Wars fan, had them with her and she was reading them.
Yeah. And I think they're
really good. They really handle the character, the Luke and Leia and Han. They're much more forward. Like they're very present. I mean, it's still part of their story, it wasn't.
Well, you can
like,
tell that by
I'm
this
thinking about
cover.
it-
Looking at the covers here, I mean, whose story is this? It's a
Yes,
continuation of what happened.
100%. And yeah, now that I'm looking at this, actually, I'm even thinking to myself, like, geez, they really didn't want this. They didn't want to tell Luke and Han and Leia's story. They just wanted them.
This is what it should have been.
Right.
Yeah, this is what it should have been.
It's almost like we've all bought the idea that it shouldn't have been about these 3, that it should have been about Rey or somebody new.
Oh, I didn't feel that way.
Oh, okay.
I felt like it should have been because even the promotion for I keep forgetting the name of the movie, the first one.
Force
The Force
Awakens.
Awakens.
The Force Awakens, yeah. The Force the Force Awakens, I thought was going to be about the main three, Luke, Leia, and Han, and because the marketing for the movie did include those three together, marketing the movie together and on many shows. And so I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to see this movie with all three of them together again.
Yeah.
And
Well, in 2012, I'm just to stay in that 1 year.
oh, sure.
This was what they had. This is what Disney bought. Basically, they bought Lucasfilm that was making the Clone Wars, and they had this sequel trilogy written by Timothy Zahn, and George Lucas gave Disney his treatments for the next three movies. He actually wrote up a plan for his own sequel trilogy that would replace Timothy Zahn's, and he gave them to Disney. And he's like, here's episode 7, 8, and 9. And they're like, you got it, boss. We're going to make these movies. We're your friend out here. You know?
Yeah.
But Disney decided to go a different way. And that's coming up here in a second. But at this point in time, you have two winners, Disney and Kathleen Kennedy, coming into the situation to take over Star Wars. They promptly canceled Clone Wars, which ticked me off because Clone Wars was ending on a real strong high note. Some of the best Star Wars I'd ever seen were the final 4 episodes of season 5. So they canceled it, and there's an impression that this is going to be a hard reset for Disney. And it didn't take long, but they announced that they're going to make a new sequel trilogy. Disney makes the announcement, and this is exciting, right?
Oh,
Finally,
this is exciting stuff. And who do they hire to direct these movies?
Well,
J.J.
at least
Abrams.
Abrams coming in for this first one. Yes.
Right. At least for the first. Now, we have to dial it back to 2012. This guy was on a hot streak too.
Yes.
Yeah.
J.J. Abrams. He was well known. He put himself pretty much on the map because of his work on that television show Lost. He was heavily involved in this, and this is really where I started to hear about Bad Robot and J.J. Abrams. I knew about him from Lost. He also worked on shows like Cloverfield, but I think most famously in 2008, 2009, J.J. Abrams rebooted Star Trek.
Yes.
He got Star Trek. Right. Yes.
Yeah. And did you like the the rebooted Star Trek?
No.
No.
I
That
didn't
is
mind
a
it.
firm no. If there's any movie I would ever talk smack about, this is the one.
Ooh, Retro, we got to have that convo. Well, go ahead. Take a minute. Tell us what you think about it.
Okay, the filmmaking itself was really great. I love the visual style. The actors were fantastic. The essential plot and storytelling is just like dog poo. I mean, it's just wrong on every level, and using time travel as your get out of jail card to like start the reboot the whole thing was like, okay, your reasoning makes no sense, even if so. Like it just was just horrible. It really took me out of being a fan of Star Trek altogether, which was really, I have not gone back since, to be very honest with you. And I was a big fan of Star Trek before this movie, but I respect the movie for the filmmaking, really great stuff. And I've seen it, after I just start laughing because everything about it is hilariously bad. So I do have a good time when I watch it, though.
Heath, what about you?
I think I saw it in theaters because I wanted to try something new. Because as you and I have talked about, Doug, we've gone through a lot of Star Trek, and we had the like the decline of Star Trek movies, and this was supposed to be something new and fresh. And in retrospect, I can't even remember all that much about it. I do remember the opening battle with that, like Kirk's father is lost or something like that, and so I barely even remember this movie. I just remember like a lot of this era of Star Trek as flash with no substance,
Yes.
which
It
is
got
not
worse.
what I
It got
wanted out of
worse
Star
even.
Trek.
Yeah.
Right.
This was
Yeah.
probably
So,
the best of the three.
right. And so, I remember thinking, I mean, J.J. Abrams, wow, what an incredible position to be in, where you get to work on both Star Wars and now you're going to, Star Trek, and now you're going to go work on Star Wars.
Yes.
And to have done it badly, is inexcusable. I was like, because I think I remember the thought that, okay, J.J. Abrams is coming on board with Star Wars. Wow. I mean, what kind of a dream job position is that after you've already been able to do Star Trek? But then I was like, but I didn't like what he did with Star Trek. So
Well,
we'll see. I remember that
But
being
his
my
stock was
opinion.
high, is my
But
his
his
point.
stock
stock
was
was
high.
very,
His
very
stock was
high.
high. His stock was
Everybody
high, but
seemed to
I
love it.
personally wasn't a big fan of the Star Trek movies. So I was like,
Yeah.
so when that information came out, I was like, oh, I mean,
So
maybe.
you had a
but
question mark there.
I had a
Well,
question mark. Yeah.
one of the things people love to say about this movie, especially when it did come out, was that he made Star Trek look like Star Wars.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, yeah, I could see where that's going. And Star Wars was going to be written by, he was going to take part in the writing, but somebody else was going to be writing with him to guide him through the Star Wars, lore and ish, make all the Star Wars stuff look Star Wars ish.
Well,
And
and you
so
got
I
Disney
was,
sitting there with their storytellers,
yes, so there's no way that he could mess this up, is sort of the idea that I was going through. But at the time, the world was like, okay, do what you did for Star Trek, which was really made it munchable for like the average person. It
I
took
love
the
that word,
nerdy,
munchable. That's perfectly said.
yeah, it took all the nerdy stuff out of it and made it more like splash and glamour and glimmer, and like, yeah, this is Star Trek now. And instead of like making it really heady and intellectual and perplexing and complex like Star Trek usually is. So it was very interesting to see how people were like, okay, whatever you did with Star Trek, do that with Star Wars. And I think it would have worked if he had been able to tell all three of the stories. But at this time, for the first one, everybody had a lot of confidence in him. And to be honest with you, I think he made a great attempt in the first movie.
Yeah. So he's, famous for the mystery boxes. It's almost a perfect storm in some way when you think about it. It's the guy who starts plot lines and doesn't know how to end them is removed and handed over to a guy that destroys everything that came before. I mean, with
Yes.
Rian Johnson. So, but I got to admit, Star Trek, the reboot, was a guilty pleasure movie for me. I knew it was bad. I knew it made no sense. When I was talking to my fellow friends who love movies, I couldn't even explain. I couldn't even defend myself. So I was just like, well, makes no sense. It's ridiculous. But I love that they wore the shirts from the original series. I thought Bruce Greenwood as Admiral Pike was outstanding. I even didn't mind Chris Pine. He had a certain charisma there. The guy Zachary Quinto looked like Spock. And so there were things I did like about it. And by the way, we probably forgot, this was one of Chris Hemsworth's first appearances.
Yes.
He played George Kirk. And by the way, the opening sequence I actually really like. I remember there was a scene in the trailer where you saw this corkscrewing missile coming up underneath the hull of the Enterprise. And there's like phasers sweeping everywhere. And I was like, that is a starship under serious stress. I was like, that is an intense action scene. So I was looking forward to some of that. But I know intellectually this is absolutely garbage. You can't have the plot line was Nero comes out and waits for 40 years in space.
Yeah. Oh.
It's almost impossible to say that that's what you went with. It's almost impossible. So, and the more I watch it, the more there's things that I just am shocked stayed in there. So this, I think, launched a new era in filmmaking of making you feel one way, making it look good and flashy, but not making any sense. Which, of course, that will carry over into this. But at the time, you had the best storytelling studio in the world or company in the world with Disney. You had the best exec in the world with all the experience in the trenches with Kathleen Kennedy, and you got the hottest director coming up in Hollywood to take over Star Wars. This was like the Trinity. Like they had this was can't miss. Right? This was can't miss. This is how you do Star Wars. I remember that's the way we all thought about it.
Yeah.
Lots of that optimism. I think most people were extremely optimistic for what J.J. Abrams, Kathleen Kennedy, and Disney were going to do for Star Wars. So, and of course, do you guys remember this photo?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
This was one of the famous photos because this was one of our first looks at the bands getting back together. You've got Mark Hamill, you've got Harrison Ford, you've got Carrie Fisher. Was Peter Mayhew? I think he was still there, right? Anthony Daniels, like the whole team is coming back, and they're being joined by this new squad of up and coming young actors and actresses. You know, you've got, who do you got in there? You see Adam Driver, John Boyega, Daisy Ridley, and help me with her name, Christy. She played Brienne of Tarth.
I would not know.
Oh my God, I cannot believe it.
Gwendolyn, isn't it?
Gwendolyn.
Oh, Gwendolyn Christie, who played
yes, Captain Phasma.
Captain Phasma, yeah.
Oh,
Love
right.
it.
Yes, Gwendolyn Christie. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So and
talk
she
about
had
another used character.
Yes.
And she had great acclaim from Game of Thrones.
Right.
Yes.
Her
portrayal of Brienne of Tarth was epic. She was a badass woman in that movie, and she held her own, and she kind of chewed up the screen whenever she was on it, and looked good doing it. So when I heard that Brienne of Tarth is going to play a top tier Imperial officer, I was like, oh man, this is great. This is going to be
cooking.
Great, you know?
Yeah, they're cooking.
They were cooking. That's right. And then all this like really fired up the rumor mills. Do you guys remember all the, all the rumors that started coming through about what's going to happen, what the plot line is going to be? We found out, this is when we found out that Daisy Ridley is going to play the new lead is going to be a woman.
Yeah.
It's Daisy Ridley. And quite honestly, she looks good. She looked good as Rey this was 2014 at this point. Her coming out and doing this character, it looked like it was going to be a hit. Did anyone have any strong opinions about Daisy Ridley being cast?
No, I think at the time people were excited. They were like, just give us, they were like, give us the story. They were ready for. The only hiccup they had was with the trailer because they couldn't understand how because of the whole setup of the Imperial I would say makeup of mostly like Caucasian individuals, like they seeing a black stormtrooper, they were like, how is this possible? So we'll get to that kind of weird thing. That was the only weird thing. But no one ever said anything about her. They were excited about everything to do with this. This was food for the masses. Anything you could give about the story plot, people were eating it up. They were eating it up.
That's right. I don't remember anyone complaining that it was going to have a female lead. Maybe a news article could dig something up here and there, but on the whole, I think the general opinion out there was that no one cared. There just wasn't a controversy around it. And I remember in 2013, 2014, leading up to this, that it was generally pure optimism for this upcoming trilogy. They had the right guys on it. Everything was working. And do you remember the first photo they leaked from the set? Do you remember this photo?
Oh wow, yeah.
This was one. I remember this
good.
was one of the first photos they leaked, and I was like, "Oh, an X-wing, but it's blue." It was like, it was like really, really
I don't
cool.
remember that.
Yeah.
And I think that might even be Oscar Isaac, who, by the way, he was starting to become a red hot actor. At the
Right.
time.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
Oscar Isaac.
And
Yeah,
I think people were impressed that they were using they were building actual things. Like this was an actual prop and not a CGI prop, because
Well-
everything was starting to become blue screen on everything. So people were like really excited. Oh, well, real shit. They actually built that for the movie. Like
Well-
that's stuff that people wanted.
Well, and Disney made a big point, because probably the greatest criticism of the prequels, well, there's plenty dialogue, but one of the big banes of that trilogy was the overuse of CGI,
Yes.
the failure for the actors to connect to the world that they were in, and it didn't go over well. So J.J. Abrams, Disney, Lucasfilm, they made it a point to let the public know we're going back to some practical effects. This is a world you could see and touch. And so you're right. A photo like this said everything's on track, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Heath, you
So
don't remember this
I'm
photo?
I do not remember that photo. This is the first time I've ever seen it.
Oh, yeah,
see,
this was the
this
first
is
photo
bringing
that
back
was leaked out.
memories. Yeah. This is definitely bringing back memories of the excitement.
Yeah. Yep. And and then we got our first look at Brienne of Tarth, of course, behind the
Oh,
scenes.
cool.
We got this new look stormtrooper, but she's wearing
I remember
chrome
what is
armor.
she because of the different look. Yes.
Yeah, and I remember there was a topical issue about her. She didn't want to take her mask off. She thought it was somehow empowering that she didn't have to show her face and prove that she was a woman or anything in the show, that she actually pushed to wear her mask throughout the entire film. I remember that being a topic I read about.
Oh,
and
that's cool.
and I was like, well, this is Brienne of Tarth, listen to her.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but you could tell she was a woman by her voice, which I thought was good enough. Yeah. But
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So Disney did produce something in this little era when all the optimism was buzzing, when all lights are green, all green is go, everything's humming. Disney did produce something. Now they canceled. Oh wait, I have to point this out. They did release an announcement that they would not be following pre-existing lore. So they did around this time make the announcement that, like, hey, this is going to be new. This is going to be purely Disney. So the Timothy Zahn novels, the George Lucas treatments, the extended universe, it's gone. And no one really cared that. I mean, people cared, but they were certainly still willing to give Disney a chance. But it was around this time that they made this announcement. I think I don't have the date. I think it was April of 2013 that they made that announcement.
Yeah.
But Disney did produce something, and there's something important about all this. They canceled Clone Wars and they replaced it with Rebels, and a big downgrade in animation, and it wasn't that good. I was so mad that they canceled Clone Wars, and then this is what they replaced it with. So I was very upset about Rebels. But then about a month into it, because it wasn't well received, they brought in Dave Filoni to help them with their first product, and he helped them with their storytelling. And he very swiftly, by the end of the first season, brought in Ahsoka Tano into Rebels. So I was happy about that. They brought her back into this show. So around this time, they started to pick up on the successful parts of the Clone Wars. She was one of my favorite heroines, and now she's back. So I'm getting new Ahsoka Tano stuff around this time, and I was excited to hear about that and to watch those episodes. So you guys didn't watch any of the Clone Wars? or the Rebels?
I did not. Now, I did pick up some episodes years later, but at the time, it was not
At the
something I was
time,
on.
no.
I remember
watched
that
some of-
my cousins, my younger cousins, were watching, and I remember people talking about, like, my uncle and aunt talking about Ahsoka Tano, but I was not part of that. So that had its following. They were watching. They were younger. They were watching. I was not at the time.
Yeah, my kids and we watched some of the episodes. It was on Disney XD. Remember that? We did watch some of those. And it was the first thing that really came out. But it's time to get to the big event. This was a big deal. When this came out, the Force Awakens trailer.
Yes.
There was news articles telling us what date it was going to come out. There was all sorts of like buzz on social media about what was going to be in the trailer. So let's go through it here, because this was really our first look at the new Star Wars.
Yeah, I went back and I watched this. We talked about this briefly before, and after our other live stream, I went back and I watched this, and it brought back a whole lot of memories. I said that the X-Wing skimming over the lake was something that I remember to this day and being excited about. But I remember being very excited about this trailer. I remember there being a lot of excitement, and especially as I went back and watched it and had the memories recreated. It's a very different kind of teaser trailer than might be put out today, I was noticing. I thought, but at its time when this dropped, this was huge.
This was huge. Because we'll get to it in a second, but it ended with that Millennium Falcon TIE fighter scene, and people were literally, their heads were exploding. But when the trailer started, I was driving, I was doing work. I pulled over on the side of the road, like, because the trailer just dropped, and I watched it on my phone in my car, and then I called everybody. But the first image in the trailer, we got a good look at John Boyega. So he's dressed as a stormtrooper. He's on a desert planet, and it's John Boyega. And Retro, you were talking about it. There was a minor controversy about why there would be a black stormtrooper. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. It was kind of like a shock to the fans, because they knew, like, the presence of the Empire was supposed to kind of be like the elite usually would be cast with English actors, and sort of like this whole reference to Germany in World War II, and sort of like had that presence. And so this was sort of a stark difference, and people were like, what's going on here? This doesn't seem to make sense. But then there were some sleuths who were like, hey, you know what? This is the theory that we have, and maybe he's not a stormtrooper. Maybe he's actually, somebody who is pretending to be a stormtrooper to get out of a sticky situation. So I think it started out like big controversy, and then people started thinking about it and say, well, let's watch this, because it looks like it's going to be actually good, and maybe there's a reason why we have a black stormtrooper. And so that was something that I thought was very interesting. At first, it sounds pretty awful. It sounds like the fans are racist and like oh, you can't have a black. But in the lore of Star Wars, when you look at all of the characters that have been traditionally placed in the Empire, that was sort of something that people were like, okay, he's not a clone trooper, and he's not a typical Imperial trooper. Like, what's the story here? So at the finish of all the controversy, it was more like, let's watch the movie and find out. And
it was
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it was a minor tremor, I would say, about not understanding what they were seeing. I remember some of the confusion was they're all supposed to be clones, and so it makes no sense. But in the lore, they stopped doing cloning after the Clone Wars, and they started conscripting guys. So I knew that a black stormtrooper is perfectly normal. That this would be this. There's nothing really that startling about it. We just hadn't seen it before. So And now that I'm looking at this image and remembering how I felt the first time I saw it and I think they really blew it with Finn, this character. They
did.
Big time.
I mean, I knew they did, but seeing him again like this at the beginning, because he had a cool storyline, a defecting stormtrooper,
which had never been present before. Yeah,
totally. Well, and he wielded a lightsaber in it. Like they blew it with this guy. They had gold.
Yes. There was tons of drama to be had in the storytelling here, and it seemed to start off very well for the first movie, and it just left you kind of like, hey, we want to know more about Finn and what's going to happen with him.
Right.
And the curiosity level was high. John Boyega played the part so well, and we were looking for that. We were looking for a character to hold on to in this, and he was great. I thought he was fantastic, and the opportunity was there to make a really great character. We didn't learn about his family, where he's from, how he got taken in by the troops, and then they also demoted his position and made him just like a janitor.
That was weird.
Not cool.
That was
Like,
weird.
okay, that's why give him the opportunity to be a hero.
Well, and he was very present, very involved in The Force Awakens. So a lot circulated around his character. And then by the last, and we'll get to it in The Last Jedi, he was sidelined big time. And then by the time he got to Rise of Skywalker, they didn't even need to. He was just there. And but I remember how it felt at this stage, and he was one of the more interesting characters, if not the most interesting character. He's one of them at least. And seemed to be the character that we all wanted to know what would happen next. Out of the handful of new characters, he was definitely a hit, I would say. So they blew it. Do you guys? This scene actually never made it into the movie, but you remember it from the trailer. Remember, he like stands to the side and he ignites the lightsaber.
I remember that, and the controversy about this lightsaber, people talking about whether or not this makes sense or not. The crossguard lightsaber. I mean, I remember all that. Yes, that was.
Yeah, but this was our first look at like the new lightsaber, the new villain.
I remember there was a Stephen Colbert section of his show where Stephen Colbert was talking about like how he'd been a Star Wars fan longer than anybody else, because he got to see the original Star Wars like a week before, like in some kind of pre-release or something like that. Or I should have looked that up before now, but I remember him talking about saying, hey, he did a section of his show breaking down this crossguard lightsaber on the basis that he had seen the Star Wars A New Hope before anybody else had, a week before. And he said he had some kind of bit where it's like I was walking around school going and everybody just thought I had asthma because they didn't understand yet. They didn't understand what was coming with Darth Vader. I think he was like breaking down how like the crystal, the Kyber crystal inside could break.
Yes.
So I remember this. I remember the crossguard lightsaber.
Yeah, there were many theories about this saber, and people were saying, "Oh, it must be a damaged Kyber crystal," and that's the reason why it's not like it's reverberating a little bit instead of
it had kind of a different sound and look, right?
Yeah, so there were a lot of theories on this, and there were a lot of people recreating the scene on YouTube, like actually like doing recreations of the trailer, which I thought was really brilliant, and it just shows you how excited you go to those videos now, millions of views, because people were really excited about these trailers.
Well, and toys. Everybody bought their Kylo Ren lightsaber. I know we had like 3 of them in the house. My son had the one that it had the batteries, and it lit up. It was all red, and we would have lightsaber battles. I have family videos of me
that's so
chasing him
cool.
around the house with the Kylo Ren lightsaber, and he'd trying to fight me, and he's like 2 or 3 years old. But yeah, this was everywhere. The crossguard lightsaber toy everywhere. And then, of course, we're in the first look section here. We also get our good first look at Daisy Ridley as Rey and BB-8.
Yeah.
Remember how big BB-8 was? This everybody loved BB-8.
Yeah. And this is all getting us charged up for doing what? Buying merch. Because as soon as you see these new aspects of Star Wars, you wanted to get that item. You wanted, you wanted a BB-8, anything like a lighter or a, or any little thing that could remind you of this movie. And it was huge. It was huge.
Yeah, I actually had the. Here's a photo. I had the thing. You hooked it up to your phone. It was remote control. That's a picture of me. I think at Christmas time opening it up. You controlled it on your phone, and this thing you could drive it around your house, man. You would just wheel around and go in the kitchen and head over to and it was awesome. And these things, I remember it was a pretty pricey thing, but a ton of merchandise at this time. I think we were buying just about everything they had. My son, this is a picture of my son Jacob, opening up his gift. There's the remote control. He's got the BB-8 little cap on and the Star Wars PJs.
So cute.
So merchandising, healthy, robust.
Yeah.
In fact, possibly unprecedented. The way this was playing out. So
because it's just from the trailers, just from the trailers, people were going nuts. There were a lot of people were starting to make their own stuff they couldn't find. They were like, "Oh, we're going to make our own stuff."
You were saying on Etsy, right?
Yeah, especially if there are things that people or props or toys that people want and they can't find it anywhere. The people on Etsy will make them special on Etsy, or you could buy it that way. But yeah, that was the new R2D2, right?
Yeah, and the rolling effect, I think honestly it was a good touch. I mean, I know he was jokingly called like a soccer ball and all that, but it was a good touch. It was a new look. It felt Star Warsy. It looked Star Warsy. He did seem to have some personality as a droid. So again, this seemed to all be fitting together. And here we have our first look at Poe Dameron. He was the hotshot rebel pilot, played by Oscar Isaac. A big rising star in Hollywood. I was excited about this guy. I was like, oh man, Poe Dameron, this guy, he's probably going to be an awesome character.
Yeah. And
then, Retro, you want to talk about Captain Phasma?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I mentioned it somewhere. Captain Phasma is a character. As soon as she showed up on screen, people wanted more. Like whatever was offered on screen wasn't enough. People were buying up all the merch for Captain Phasma. They wanted, she was a fantastic cosplay for a lot of people. It was insane how people just wanted more of that character and wanted a storyline behind her, wanted more of the character than what we received, unfortunately. I think in the first movie, she was taken out too soon, and I think even they didn't do her honor to her character at all in the first one, and the other movies completely, diminished. And instead of really looking at this character and seeing what they could do as far as intimidation, to create either a villain or maybe somebody who redeems themselves, like something, so we can feel like, we got this cool character. Yeah, she's just there and hanging out in the background, and nothing much else than that. So it was a true shame, because I remember watching so many channels that were talking about the movie, about how much they love this character, how much they wanted more from this character. And it seems like the writers just didn't understand that. They didn't understand what they had.
Yeah, I remember being a little surprised by how little she was in The Force Awakens, because she got a lot of FaceTime in the buildup. You know, the trailer, and they
Yes.
featured her in magazines, and so there was a lot of buzz around Captain Phasma, and then she's in the movie for like 8 minutes or something. So I remember being shocked, but I remember telling myself, oh, she's going to be like almost Darth Vader like by the time we get to episode.
Yes, like, could you imagine if she just kept on rising in power until she's like, she was kind of like the one in command? Like, I would love to have seen that from that. And talk about, organically building that strong female character. Just a strong character. Just work on it. Work on the characters you have to make them better, instead of trying to just create some character out of no thin air. She was perfect for such a thing.
Yeah. And she was a wildly popular character for the minimal screen time. Even after Force Awakens, there was still a lot of buzz around Captain Phasma. I'll never forget that. We also got our first look at Princess Leia, as we find out she's going to be General Leia now, which in retrospect, I don't like the General Leia thing, but I really liked seeing Carrie Fisher.
Oh yeah. I mean,
go ahead.
She's regal. Look at her. And I think it was a step down for her to be a general. I mean, general take their orders from rulers, So
Right.
I think she should have been princess. She should have remained as princess, but one that is excellent at military strategy.
Well, she should have been a politician, a high-level politician in the New Republic.
Yeah, I thought she should have been the Supreme Chancellor. They needed a scene of her where Chancellor Valorum and Chancellor Palpatine, that thing that elevates in the middle of the Senate House, they needed a scene of her standing there addressing the New Republic and outlining her vision of what the New Republic was going to be. That's what I thought they should have done with her.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was weird. She was a general, but she kind of just like hung around, she like just kind of walking around out there in the army base. She didn't really,
it's so weird how you're like, where were you for 30 years? What have you been doing? And she's just a general hiding out in the underground somewhere. Just feels so unbefitting of her character, and also just like a betrayal of the history.
Well, but during the trailer, though, it was just, we got like new Princess Leia look, new Leia, like our first look at new Leia.
Oh, sure, yes.
We also got this little nugget out of the trailer, which got everyone freaking out. The melted helmet of Darth Vader. Yeah. Remember this?
Oh, this like literally melted brains. People were like, "What?" Like, you can see, just look up trailer reactions of this movie, and people are just screaming when they get to this part, because it was such a shock. Like, somebody went and dug up Darth Vader's mask.
Yeah, and it's burnt from the funeral pyre when last we saw him, Luke Skywalker, with the Jedi pyre in Return of the Jedi. So we are getting a sense, like, I'm getting thrilled, because I remember getting kind of some of the nuggets that I wanted, the tie-ins from the old prequels. I'm seeing the new actors.
Right, yeah.
And I'm seeing the old actors, and it seems like this is all kind of fusing together really, really well. Yeah. And then, of course, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it starts to assuage the negative energy that I had about J. Abrams when this is released. I was like, oh, I remember that. Oh, so, well, this looks good. This looks good. Yeah.
It did.
Maybe he's learned something.
Yeah.
Well, and of course, and Heath, I'm curious, we get the final shot of the
Oh yeah.
trailer. It's Han Solo and Chewie Chewbacca in the Millennium Falcon, and the camera closes in, and he goes, "Chewie, we're home."
Yeah.
And Chewie's got his bowcaster out. Like it was right out of my imagination. This was perfect.
Yeah.
Heath, how did you feel when you saw this?
Well, I said that we're heading to something really good. The atmosphere after that, I don't remember how many times I watched the trailer, but I remember passing it around, sending out the links. Oh, just aunt, brother, all of that. And there's also like the music note that hits as soon as they're done here. That's like a sense of nostalgia and remembrance. We couldn't wait.
Yes.
It was huge, absolutely huge. This trailer came out in late November. So at this point, we're about a month away from the release of the film. And so there is some massive buzz building up for The Force Awakens coming out. So I want to cover one other thing. Something actually was released in between the trailer and the film. I doubt you guys even remember it, but it came out right after the trailer. It was small time in terms of news, but there was some. Rebel Season 2 came out. And the only reason this matters is because James Earl Jones returned to voice Darth Vader in some scenes. So even in the small world that this was in, it had some real buzz to it. And I remember I couldn't wait to see the Rebels show with Darth Vader. They had a two-part series called The Siege of Lothal. And there's Darth Vader showing up in this cartoon with James Earl Jones doing the voice. And the scenes he was in were phenomenal. Like Rebels went from to me, a 5. It was a 5. It wasn't that incredible of a show, but it was a 5. And it popped up to a 10 for these couple episodes with Darth Vader in them. And we also get something important in this. Ahsoka Tano fights Darth Vader. And this was one of the few times that a cartoon managed to capture some real gravitas in a lightsaber battle from a non-legacy character like Ahsoka Tano. Because I watched her as Anakin's Padawan for 5 years. And Anakin turns to the dark side in Revenge of the Sith. And here, this is the first time they see each other again and they fight. And it was cool. During the fight, she nicks him and it breaks his helmet. And I got a chance to see what Anakin looked like, under the helmet for a second, when he looks at her, and even, so it was just cool. You got a glimpse of Anakin's humanity, in this battle. I thought it was really cool. It was a minor issue around the people that followed Rebels, which I was one of them. But it was a big deal to that minor group because James Earl Jones was in it. Ahsoka Tano is back in it. So we're starting to get some Clone Wars feel out of Rebels, with Dave Filoni at the helm there. And that is going to take us to the end of part 1 here. The takeover of Star Wars by Disney and Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams and the entire Western world and beyond getting ready to see what was going to be the sequel trilogy.
To see what that this is actually going to be. Yes.
Right. So that's it, guys. That's part 1 of this history, which is Heir to the Empire of Star Wars. The takeover, the set, and that's only 2. It's only a couple of years, but it actually encompasses where Lucasfilm was at the time when this took over, who Kathleen Kennedy was. So we covered a lot of ground in this retrospective analysis and history of Lucasfilm here.